I remember the exact moment my life fell apart. It was a Tuesday evening around 6 p.m. when my brother called an emergency family meeting at my parents' house. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it wouldn't be good. The tone in his voice had that weight to it, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even understand why. When I walked into the living room, everyone was already there. My mother was sitting on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. My father stood by the window, his back to me, shoulders tense. My brother sat in the leather chair, the one he always claimed as his, and my sister was pacing near the fireplace. Nobody smiled, nobody greeted me. The air felt thick, suffocating, like something terrible had already been decided before I even arrived. "We need to talk about what happened," my father said, finally turning to face me. His eyes were cold, colder than I'd ever seen them. His jaw was clenched, and there was a hardness in his expression that I'd never witnessed before. "The police are going to be asking questions, and we need to get ahead of this. We need to be prepared for what's coming." My heart started racing. I could feel it pounding in my chest, each beat harder than the last. "What are you talking about? What happened? Why is everyone looking at me like that?" "The jewelry," my mother whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Someone broke into the Hendersons' house 3 days ago. They took everything from the master bedroom, $50,000 worth of jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, watches, rings, everything. And you were seen in the neighborhood that night. Someone saw a man matching your description walking near their street around 9 o'clock. I felt the room spin. The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. I was at home that night. I was alone, but I was home. I was watching television. I remember because the Knicks game was on, and they lost in the last minute. I remember being angry about it." "No one can corroborate that," my brother said flatly. He wasn't asking. He was stating a fact like he'd already made a decision about me, like my innocence was irrelevant to what he was about to say next. "And you were struggling with money. Everyone knows you've been borrowing from Mom and Dad. Everyone knows you asked Dad for $5,000 just last month." That was true. Business had been slow. The construction company I'd started 5 years ago had hit a rough patch. Projects had fallen through, contracts had been cancelled. I'd been struggling for about 8 months, and yes, I'd borrowed money from my parents. But that didn't make me a thief. That didn't make me a criminal. I looked at my parents, expecting them to defend me, to say something, to remind everyone that I'd never been in trouble before. But they just sat there, exchanging glances like they were waiting for me to confess, like they'd already decided who I was in this moment. "I didn't do this," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. I could feel them trembling in my lap, betraying the fear that was coursing through me. I would never do something like that. "You know me. You know who I am. Someone in the neighborhood has security footage," my sister interrupted, her voice sharp and certain. She'd always been like this, quick to judge, quick to condemn. "It's not clear, but it could be you. The police will see it soon. They're already building a case. Detective Morrison called Dad at work today. He said they're looking at you as a person of interest." I felt something break inside me. These were my people, my blood. The people I'd grown up with, the people who were supposed to know me better than anyone else in the world. And they were already convinced I was guilty. They weren't asking questions. They weren't defending me. They were already preparing for my downfall. My father cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice was measured and cold. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to confess. You're going to tell the police it was you, but that you acted alone. No one else was involved. You took the jewelry because you needed money, because your business was failing and you were desperate. It's a first offense, and if you cooperate fully, if you show remorse, the sentence will be lighter. Maybe you get probation. Maybe you get a year or 2 instead of 5 or 10. I stared at him, my own father. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who came to every one of my baseball games, who hugged me at my college graduation. You want me to confess to a crime I didn't commit? You want me to go to prison for something I didn't do? We want you to take the fall, so the rest of us don't go down, my mother said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air like poison, like something toxic that couldn't be taken back once it had been released. The Hendersons are threatening to press charges against anyone connected to that house. If this drags out, if the investigation spreads, if they really dig into who was in that neighborhood that night, it could implicate all of us. Your brother was in the neighborhood too that night. He was meeting a client. I was driving through on my way to dinner with a friend. Your father had a client meeting nearby at his office. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood perfectly. They were scared, terrified actually, and I was convenient. I was the one struggling financially, the one people might believe was desperate enough to steal. I was the one with less to lose in their minds. I was the one they could sacrifice without it destroying their comfortable lives. If you don't do this, my brother said, standing up from the chair and walking toward me, his presence suddenly intimidating. We're going to have to tell the police about some things we've kept quiet about for a long time. Things about your past. Things that will make you look even worse in front of a jury. Things that will paint you as someone capable of this kind of crime. He was threatening me. My own brother was standing in front of me and threatening me. I could feel the walls closing in, the pressure mounting from every direction. They'd already decided. They'd already written the story. And in their version, I was the villain. I was the criminal. I was the one who'd brought shame on the family. What things? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. My brother didn't elaborate. He just smiled, a cold, calculated smile that I'd never seen from him before. Trust me, there's plenty we could say, things you've forgotten about, things you think nobody knows about, things that would make you look very, very guilty. Over the next 3 days, I was isolated. Not physically isolated, but emotionally isolated in a way that felt even worse. My phone rang constantly with calls from my parents, my siblings, people I thought were my friends, all of them repeating the same message. Just confess. It'll be easier that way. It'll be over faster. Stop fighting it and just do what your family is asking. I felt like I was drowning. Every breath felt heavy. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. The guilt they were heaping on me was suffocating, even though I knew deep down that I hadn't done anything wrong. But doubt started creeping in like a shadow, whispering questions in my mind. Maybe I was remembering that night wrong. Maybe I had gone out and forgotten about it. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I really was guilty and just didn't remember. My mother came to my apartment on the 4th day. She sat in my kitchen at the small table where I'd eaten thousands of meals throughout my life, and she looked exhausted, like she was the victim in all of this. Like she was the one being persecuted. "Sweetheart," she said, reaching for my hand, her touch cold and desperate, "I know this is hard. I know you don't want to believe your family would ask you to do this. But family comes first. Family always comes first. We need you to be strong right now. We need you to do this for us, for all of us." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about justice. This wasn't about truth. This wasn't about right or wrong. This was about convenience. This was about choosing the path of least resistance. And I was the one they'd chosen to walk it alone. The police showed up 2 days later with a warrant. They asked me to come down to the station for questioning. As I was putting on my jacket, trying to figure out what I was going to say, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Do the right thing. Confess. We're counting on you. We're all counting on you." In that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized that if I confessed to something I didn't do, I would be betraying myself in the most fundamental way possible. I would be sacrificing my entire future, my freedom, my life, to protect people who were willing to abandon me the moment it became inconvenient to stand by my side. And if I didn't confess, I would be betraying them. There was no way to win. There was no scenario where everyone came out okay. But there was a way to survive, by telling the truth, no matter what it cost me. At the police station, I sat across from Detective Morrison in a small grey room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. The walls were bare, except for a mirror on one side, which I knew was two-way glass. Someone was watching me. Someone was recording this. He slid a folder across the table, and I could see photographs of the Hendersons' bedroom, the empty spaces where jewelry used to sit, the broken glass from the window, the overturned lamp. "Your family says you were in the neighborhood that night," he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp and observant. He was studying me carefully, trying to read my reactions. "They say you've been having significant financial difficulties. They say you've been desperate for money. They say you've made some poor decisions in the past. They say you have a history of..." He paused, flipping through pages in the folder, his expression never changing. "Making choices that hurt people around you." I realized then that my family had already been talking to the police extensively. They'd already been cooperating fully. They'd already started painting the picture they wanted Detective Morrison to see. They'd positioned themselves safely on the other side of the wall, watching to see if I would fall on the sword they'd sharpened for me. "I didn't rob anyone," I said quietly, my voice steady even though I was terrified. "I know I've had money problems. I know I've made mistakes. I know my business hasn't been doing well, but this isn't one of them. I wasn't at that house. I don't know who was, but it wasn't me. I swear to you, Detective, it wasn't me." Detective Morrison leaned back in his chair and studied me for a long moment before speaking. "Your brother told us you had some kind of grudge against the Hendersons, something about their son and a business deal that went wrong. He said there was bad blood between you." I closed my eyes. My brother was lying. Or he was twisting the truth so badly it barely resembled reality anymore. Yes, I'd had a business conflict with the Hendersons' son years ago. It was about a construction contract that fell through. It was resolved amicably, we'd both moved on. But in my family's hands, it had become a motive for robbery. It had become evidence of my guilt. "He's lying," I said, opening my eyes and looking directly at the detective. "Or he's exaggerating to make me look bad. That was years ago. It's not relevant. The Hendersons' son and I had a business disagreement. We settled it. We moved on. There's no grudge. There's no bad blood." "Your mother said you asked her for money multiple times in the weeks before the robbery," the detective continued, his voice never wavering. "She said you seemed desperate. She said you were talking about losing everything. She said you mentioned how unfair it was that other people had so much money when you were struggling." My mother is scared," I interrupted, my voice rising slightly before I caught myself and brought it back down. "And she's trying to protect people she cares about. But I'm not guilty of this crime. Yes, I've been struggling financially. Yes, I've asked my parents for help, but I'm not a thief. I would never break into someone's home and steal from them." The detective stood up and walked around the table, standing closer to me now. "We're going to be running comprehensive forensic tests on evidence recovered from the crime scene. We'll be examining the scene for fingerprints, DNA, hair fibers, anything that can place someone at that location. If you're telling the truth, the evidence will support that. If you're lying, if you were actually at that house, the evidence will show it. We'll find your fingerprints. We'll find your DNA. We'll find something that connects you to that crime scene." "Then you'll find nothing," I said, "because I wasn't there. I spent the next 6 days in a state of suspended animation. I couldn't work. I couldn't think straight. I called my office and told them I was sick. I told them I needed time off. I just waited for the results, knowing that my family was probably waiting too, probably hoping that some evidence would magically appear that connected me to that crime. Because if I was guilty, then they could move forward. If I was guilty, then their problem was solved, and their consciences could rest easy. On the 7th day, Detective Morrison called me back to the station. This time, his expression was different. He looked almost apologetic as I walked into the room. There was a gentleness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "The forensic results came back," he said, laying out a detailed report in front of me. I could see charts, graphs, DNA sequences, fingerprint comparisons. We found fingerprints at the scene, multiple sets. We found hair fibers. We found DNA evidence from multiple sources, and none of it matches you. Not a single marker, not a single point of comparison. You were telling the truth. I felt something release inside my chest, like I'd been holding my breath for a week and had finally been allowed to exhale. The pressure that had been crushing me, the weight of being accused by my own family, the fear of going to prison for a crime I didn't commit, it all seemed to lift slightly. "We've identified 2 of the people involved in the robbery," he continued, his tone becoming more serious. "Both of them have prior criminal records. Both of them have confessed in exchange for reduced sentences. Neither of them mentioned you. And forensically, there's absolutely no evidence that you were ever at that house." I wanted to ask him whose fingerprints they'd found. I wanted to know if it was someone I knew, someone from my family. I wanted to know if my suspicions were correct. But I already knew. I could feel it in my bones. It had to be someone close to the Hendersons. Someone who knew about the jewelry. Someone with access or knowledge that wouldn't be obvious to an outsider. The detective looked at me directly, his expression serious and businesslike. "Your family's story didn't add up from the beginning. Once we got the forensic evidence clearing you, we started looking into their statements more carefully. We noticed some inconsistencies, some timeline issues, some details that didn't match. We're continuing our investigation into whether anyone in your family was involved in providing information about the Hendersons' home, about the security systems, about when they would be away. We're looking into whether anyone in your family knew more about this robbery than they initially disclosed." My heart pounded. They were investigating my family. They were actually considering that my family might have been complicit in the robbery, or at least had knowledge of it before it happened. When I left the police station that evening, there were no calls waiting for me, no texts, no messages from my parents or my siblings asking if I was okay, or if I needed anything, or if I wanted to talk about what the police had said. They just went silent. The pressure that had been crushing me for a week, the constant calls and text messages and visits from family members begging me to confess, all of it suddenly evaporated, replaced by a hollow, aching silence that felt almost worse than the pressure itself. 3 days later, my mother called. Her voice was thin, brittle, like it might shatter if she spoke too loudly. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to pretend I wasn't home, to extend this silence indefinitely. But I picked up. "The police came to our house," she said, without any preamble. "They had questions. They asked us about that night. They asked us where we were. They asked us about our relationship with the Hendersons. They asked us if we knew anything about the security system at their house. We told them everything we knew. We cooperated fully." I said nothing. I just listened to her breathing on the other end of the line, waiting to see where this was going. "Your brother is lawyering up," she continued. "He got an attorney. He says he won't answer any more questions without legal representation. Your father is furious. He says your brother is making everything worse by looking defensive." "Maybe he has something to hide," I said quietly. "Don't be ridiculous," my mother snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "Your brother doesn't have anything to hide." He's just being cautious. Any smart person would be cautious when the police are asking questions. The police cleared me, I said. Completely. No evidence, nothing. But they're still investigating your family because something about your stories doesn't add up. So maybe you should all be talking to lawyers instead of calling me to check on how I'm doing. We were wrong about you, she said, and I could hear something in her voice that might have been an attempt at an apology, but it came out sounding more like an accusation, like I was somehow responsible for their doubt. We were scared and we made a mistake. You asked me to confess to a crime I didn't commit, I said, my voice rising for the first time since the call started. You threatened me. You told me you'd tell the police things about me if I didn't do what you wanted. You sacrificed me to protect yourselves. That's not making a mistake, that's betrayal. Your father wants to talk to you, she said, ignoring everything I'd just said. He wants to explain why we did what we did. I don't want to talk to him, I replied. I don't want to talk to any of you right now. I need time. I hung up before she could respond. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation deepened. I didn't hear the details directly, but I pieced them together from local news reports and from a detective who called to update me on the case status. My brother had been seen on a traffic camera 2 blocks from the Hendersons' house at 8:47 p.m. that night. My brother, who told the police he was meeting a client across town. My brother who'd corroborated the story that I was the one in the neighborhood. The police also discovered that my brother had been having financial problems of his own. Serious ones. He'd been gambling. He owed money to some very dangerous people, the kind of people who don't accept excuses or payment plans, the kind of people who make threats. My father had apparently loaned my brother money on multiple occasions to cover his debts. My mother had even taken out a second mortgage on their house to help him. But the money kept disappearing, and the debts kept growing. And then suddenly, my brother needed a large sum of money urgently, money that he didn't have. When the police presented my brother with the traffic camera footage, he cracked. He admitted that he'd been at the Hendersons' house that night. He admitted that he'd known about the jewelry through a connection at his gym, someone whose wife worked as a housekeeper for the Hendersons. He admitted that he'd planned the robbery with 2 other men with criminal records who specialized in high-end residential burglaries. He admitted that he'd intended to split the proceeds and use his share to pay off his gambling debts, but he also said something that cut deeper than any physical blow could have. He said that when the police started asking questions and looking at him as a suspect, he'd panicked. He'd called a family meeting because he was terrified of going to prison. And when he realized that the police had a theory that it was me, he'd decided to let them pursue that line of investigation. He'd decided that sacrificing me was easier than turning himself in. I knew you didn't do it, he told the police in his confession, but I was scared. I was desperate, and I thought if I convinced the family to make you confess, then the police would stop looking and I could figure out a way to get out of the country before they closed in on me. When I heard this, I felt something die inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just a kind of numb, hollow emptiness that I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated, deliberate, premeditated betrayal by someone who'd shared my childhood, who'd taught me to drive, who'd been my best man at my wedding. My father came to my apartment a week after my brother's confession. He looked smaller somehow, like the events of the past few weeks had physically diminished him. His hair seemed grayer. His face was lined with exhaustion and something else, something that might have been shame, though I wasn't sure he was capable of feeling that. I want you to know that I'm sorry, he said, sitting down on my couch without being invited to sit. I want you to know that we handled this poorly. We were scared and we weren't thinking clearly, and we made a terrible mistake. You wanted me to confess to a felony, I said, standing by the window, not looking at him. You wanted me to go to prison. You wanted me to have a criminal record for the rest of my life. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. We didn't think it would actually come to that, he said. We thought once you confessed, once you cooperated with the police, the case would be resolved quickly. We thought you'd get probation or community service or something minor. We didn't think about the long-term consequences. That's the problem, I said, finally turning to face him. You didn't think about me at all. You thought about yourselves. You thought about your reputation. You thought about your comfort. You didn't think about the fact that I'm your son. You didn't think about loyalty or love or basic human decency. My father had no response to that. He just sat there on my couch, looking at his hands like they belonged to a stranger. Your brother is going to prison, he said finally. He'll likely serve 5 to 7 years. Your mother is devastated. She's been having panic attacks. She's on medication now. The Hendersons are suing us for the emotional distress and the legal fees they incurred. Good, I said, and I meant it. You all deserve everything that's coming to you. He flinched like I'd hit him. We're still your family. No, I replied. Family is something you earn. Family is something you maintain through loyalty and love and respect. You forfeited all of that when you decided I was expendable. You forfeited it the moment you chose to protect yourselves instead of protecting me. He left after that. He didn't try to argue or convince me or make excuses. He just stood up, looked at me for a long moment like he was trying to memorize my face, and then he walked toward the door. For what it's worth, he said, pausing at the threshold, I do love you. I know you don't believe that right now, but I do. I didn't respond. I just watched him leave, and I realized that love without action, love without loyalty, love without sacrifice is just a word. It's meaningless. It's empty. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment and allowed myself to feel everything I'd been holding back for the past month. I cried, I raged, I threw things. I sat in the dark for hours without moving. And when I finally emerged from that darkness, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. I had been given a gift, though it didn't feel like one at the time. I had been shown in the clearest possible way exactly who my family was. I had been shown their true priorities. I had been shown what they were willing to do when their comfort was threatened. And I had been given the opportunity to build a life that didn't depend on their approval or their love. 6 months after my brother's conviction, I was sitting in my apartment when I received a call from Detective Morrison. He said he was following up on the case and wanted to check in on how I was doing. I told him I was doing well, that I'd started rebuilding my business, that I was focusing on moving forward. I wanted you to know, he said, that your case became something of a turning point for us in the department. It opened our eyes to how families can be complicit in framing innocent people. We've changed some of our interview protocols because of what happened with you. We're more careful now about taking family members' statements at face value. We verify more, we question more. So in a strange way, what happened to you has helped other people avoid the same situation. I thanked him for calling, and after we hung up, I thought about what he'd said. It didn't erase what my family had done, but it gave me a sense that something good might come from the tragedy. My mother tried to contact me several times over those 6 months. She sent letters. She left voicemails. She drove by my apartment, but I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to forgive her. I wasn't sure I would ever be ready. What she'd done went beyond a simple apology or explanation. It went to the core of who I was as a person and what I believed about trust and family and love. But then something changed. My sister came to see me. Not my mother, not my father. My sister, who'd been the one pacing by the fireplace at that first family meeting, who'd been the one pushing hardest for me to confess. She looked different when she came to my door. She looked smaller and sadder, and like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. I almost didn't let her in, but something in her expression made me pause. Something made me listen to what she had to say. "I've been in therapy," she said, sitting in the same spot where our father had sat months earlier. "I've been trying to understand why I acted the way I did, why I was so quick to believe you were guilty, why I was so willing to sacrifice you. And my therapist helped me realize that it wasn't really about you at all. It was about my own fear. It was about my own need to control situations and protect myself from uncertainty." "That doesn't change what you did," I said. "I know," she replied. "I know that my therapy and my realizations don't undo the damage. I know that you have every right to hate me. But I wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong we were, how cruel we were, and I wanted to apologize. Not to ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve that, but just to say that I'm sorry. I'm genuinely deeply sorry." I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at her, trying to see past the person who'd betrayed me to the person I remembered from childhood. The sister who'd protected me from bullies, the sister who'd celebrated my successes, the sister who'd been my friend. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally. "But I appreciate that you're trying to understand what you did. That's more than the rest of them have done." "Dad wants to talk to you," she said. "He's been struggling. He's been having nightmares. He feels like he's lost you and he doesn't know how to get you back." "He made his choices," I said. "Just like you did. Just like Mom did. Just like your brother did. And now you all have to live with those choices." "We do," she agreed. "We will." A year later, I received an invitation to dinner. It was from my father. It was a formal invitation, printed on nice cardstock, delivered to my office. For a long time, I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. But another part of me, a smaller part that I wasn't sure I could trust, wanted to see what my father had to say. I showed up to the restaurant on a Friday evening. My father was already there, sitting alone at a table by the window. He stood up when he saw me, and for a moment I thought he was going to try to hug me, but he didn't. He just gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Thank you for coming," he said, sitting back down. "I almost didn't," I replied. "I know," he said, "and I'm grateful that you did." We ordered food, and for a while we ate in silence. It wasn't a comfortable silence, but it wasn't hostile either. It was just the silence of two people trying to figure out how to exist in the same space after everything had been broken. "I've been thinking a lot about why I did what I did," my father said finally. "Why I was willing to sacrifice you to protect your brother, and I realized that it was because I was afraid. I was afraid that if your brother went to prison, it would reflect poorly on me as a father. I was afraid that people would judge me. I was afraid that my reputation would be damaged. So I chose to protect my reputation at the cost of my relationship with you. And that was the worst decision I've ever made." I listened to him speak, and I realized that he was genuinely trying to understand himself, genuinely trying to comprehend the magnitude of what he'd done. "I can't undo it," he continued. "I can't go back and make different choices. But I can tell you that I've spent every day for the past year regretting the choice I made. And I can tell you that I love you. I love you as my son, and I'm incredibly proud of the person you've become. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for what I did to you." I didn't respond immediately. I took a drink of water. I cut into my steak. I gave myself time to process what I was feeling. And what I was feeling was complicated. It was sadness and anger and loss, all mixed together with something else, something that might have been forgiveness, or at least the beginning of it. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were before. But I appreciate that you're trying to understand. I appreciate that you're acknowledging what you did was wrong. That's all I'm asking for. he said. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement that you heard me, that you understand that I'm sorry. As I sat across from my father that evening, eating dinner in a restaurant with soft lighting and quiet conversations happening at other tables, I realized something fundamental. I realized that forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's not about pretending that the betrayal didn't occur or that the pain wasn't real. Forgiveness is about choosing to move forward anyway. It's about deciding that you won't let other people's mistakes define your future. But I also realized something else. I realized that I didn't have to forgive them to move forward. I didn't have to reconcile with my family to heal. I could simply acknowledge what happened, honor the pain it caused, and then choose to build a life that wasn't dependent on their approval or their love. When I left that restaurant that evening, I felt different. Not healed, exactly. Not completely free from the hurt, but lighter somehow. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to walk without that weight. My business started growing. I hired new people. I took on bigger projects. I built a life that was solid and real and based on my own effort and integrity, not on family connections or inherited advantages. And I realized that, in a strange way, what my family had done to me was a gift. It had forced me to become independent. It had forced me to discover that I was stronger than I'd ever realized. It had forced me to understand that I didn't need their love or their approval to be worth something. And that was the real victory. That was the real triumph. Not that I was exonerated, not that my brother went to prison, but that I survived the betrayal and came out the other side as a better, stronger, more authentic version of myself. I survived because I chose truth over comfort. I survived because I refused to let their fear become my reality. And I survived because I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. But that doesn't mean you let that hurt define you. That doesn't mean you let it destroy you. That just means you learn who you really are when everything else has been stripped away.